It's a super edition of Ask SCPB, where members of our Babble section ask us anything related to the world of pro wrestling, WWE, AEW, other promotions that they ask. Here on the Squared Circle Psycho Babble, my name is Michael Valenti. Joining me is Ralph Valenti. Let's start things off with a Tony Khan question. And this comes from Ty Kane. Ralph, suppose Tony Khan gives CM Punk his contract buyout and lets him walk immediately instead of the compete clause, but has one condition. He has to wrestle Kenny Omega in the biggest stadium they've ever booked, not in Chicago. It must be kept quiet between everyone, and it's a loser leaves AEW match. If Punk wins, the Elite leave. If Punk loses, he leaves. What kind of numbers would this do for AEW as a pay-per-view and ticket sales?
It would definitely sell a lot of tickets. It probably would be their biggest buy rate pay-per-view wise, I would argue too. I think it's unlikely to happen because even in a losing effort, because we saw this with Kenny Omega, Jericho, those guys losing in New Japan and then still coming over to create AEW, the buzz still carried with them. If Punk decided, hey, I'm going to lose this match and still go to WWE, there would still be buzz. I don't think Tony Khan would want that. So
no, but if he's going to get any big payout out of it at the end, you know, he probably would want to recoup whatever money he's going to have to give CM Punk in a contract buyout. So what better way to do it by trying to sell this big show and this big match? The stadium, I think it depends where the show is. Obviously, if you're taking Chicago out of the equation, that's a huge, huge point to make because AEW seems to do their best ticket sales in Chicago. Every time there's a big show in AEW in Chicago, those tickets sell quickly. But they did sell out the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Do I see them going to Allegiant Stadium? No. They did do Arthur Ashe a couple times and a $1 million gate at Arthur Ashe. Technically, that's a stadium. So do you do the pay-per-view there? Maybe. You'd have to do it in the summer. So are you buying out his contract, you know, after the new year and into the summer, past WrestleMania? That's something to think about logistically. Do they do well in Jacksonville and fill out that stadium or a decent number there? Even if you do half the stadium, like say half the football field, that's still like 36,000. That's still a pretty good number to sell. And that's kind of what WWE is doing now. They're not really selling the whole stadium when they do those outdoor shows. They're kind of doing what, like half to 3/4 of the stadium? Like they block out the hard cam side on those.
A good majority of it, yeah.
Right, because you were in Nashville for SummerSlam. That whole stadium wasn't full.
Whatever they had available was pretty packed.
Right, but you could tell like they definitely didn't sell certain tickets.
Yeah, they had. I think the whole top section, like the upper tier, was all blocked off, I believe.
Okay, yeah, so that's what I would say AEW might do. Maybe an even smaller scale, but I think that would definitely do some great numbers. Pay-per-view buy rate. I don't know if they go 205,000 on that All Out, which is their current record. I think it might be close, but I don't know if they break that record off this match. It would have to be a very good story build to do that. Next question comes from Shea Oganubi. Again, another Tony Khan booking question. Do you think Tony Khan will do an Invasion Angle storyline with Ring of Honor and AEW, even though he owns both promotions? Or do you like a Survivor Series type storyline between both of them once Ring of Honor gets a TV deal?
I don't know. I can't rule it out. Do I want to see an Invasion Angle? No, I don't. Being honest, I don't think Ring of Honor has the guys that have names that would have and that was the reason that didn't work in WWE because they didn't get the top WCW guys to do the Invasion Angle and make it work. Now, can they do it if there was like a team of CM Punk, if he came back, Bryan Danielson, Cesaro, guys like that have worked in Ring of Honor, and that might be interesting for like a one-off match at like a pay-per-view.
So if, say, Jericho's still the Ring of Honor World Champion when they get their TV deal and they start this Invasion storyline, you have that star power with Jericho. You have Samoa Joe.
He's not a Ring of Honor guy, though.
I know he's not, but
he's in spite of Ring of Honor.
Yeah, but they did the same thing with the WCW Invasion Angle where like WWE guys were WCW guys.
It sucked.
It did. But they might, I mean, I wouldn't go past Tony Khan and try to do that. Or does he kind of right that wrong in that Invasion Angle and make it just quote unquote Ring of Honor guys? and have Samoa Joe, Bryan Danielson, CM Punk if he is coming back.
Chris Hero.
Was he a ring? Yeah, I guess he was a Ring of Honor guy too.
Yeah, he was.
Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, former Ring of Honor world champions, the Briscoes. Nigel McGuinness is free. Do they bring him back? Maybe he's answering Chris Jericho's open challenge. You have Claudio Castagnoli that could be part Ring of Honor. I mean,
what's his name that just debuted not too long ago?
Bandito.
Matt Taven.
Matt Taven was a Ring of Honor guy. Yep.
Yeah. Jay Lethal. I mean, there's
definitely guys there to do a Ring of Honor invasion angle. And Roosh is another one.
Gresham. Christopher Daniels.
Put SCU. Put SCU on Team Ring of Honor. All right. Our next question here comes from Patrick Holefield, and this is directly to you, Ralph. Okay?
Oh, boy.
Hypothetically speaking, if Orange Cassidy were to go away for a while and come back with a totally new gimmick from what he is now, what are the chances you become an Orange Cassidy fan?
Well, the thing I like least about him is the gimmick. I don't mind his in-ring work. I've always said that. I think it would have to depend on what the new gimmick would be. I think there have been a handful of guys that have been one character that you probably never envisioned them ever straying away from, but going into a new character completely and being incredibly successful at that. One of the examples I use for that is JBL. I mean, look at what JBL was doing in APA. And APA was over, but like as John Bradshaw Layfield before, or what was he, Justin Hawk Bradshaw?
Justin Hawk
whatever
Bradshaw,
he was.
Yep.
You never envisioned him being as good on the mic as he is and being the over heel that he is. Papa Shango, Godfather, there's a million examples. John Cena coming in as, the guy with the spiky hair, bodybuilder.
The Undertaker going from the dead man to the American badass.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a bunch of good examples. So to answer your question, if it was a character that I could get invested in like anyone else, I guess I could see myself liking him.
See, the thing with me, I have no problem with the gimmick because I think he does it so well and he works his matches to his gimmick so well. My problem with Orange Cassidy is just, I think some fans overrate him and try to put him in the same conversation as a Jericho or Bryan Danielson or John Moxley. He's like, oh, he's a main eventer for AEW. And it's like, no, he's not. He's not. He's a good mid-carder. Honestly, I think if he changes his gimmick, it actually would worsen him. I don't know what kind of gimmick he would do that would help him get even more over than where he is now.
Unless he's just a full-on heel.
Yeah. And I don't know how a heel Orange Cassidy works with this current gimmick. That would be interesting. Unless he becomes like a Jim Cornette kind of, complete 180, like outspoken, says all the wrong things, hates everybody kind of thing. That's really the most interesting thing. But all right, the next question comes from Shallow. If you got the opportunity to work for WWE or AEW, would you take the offer? And what are some changes you'd like to make in the company if you choose to work for it?
I would accept both offers. I would definitely push guys more, give more TV time to guys that I feel should be allotted that time. Women's division, AEW wise. I know what I like in wrestling and I know what I dislike in wrestling. I can't really honestly sit here and say I could go into either of those companies and make a significant change. I'm not the right person to make those suggestions. That said, if I was offered a position in either of them, I would accept.
Maybe I should abstain from answering this question because technically I did work for WWE. And I never said this before because I didn't want to have people questioning my quote unquote credibility on this podcast for what it's worth. But I have said thousands upon thousands of times I work in television. One of the jobs I had from June of 2020 to August of last year was I was a mass control operator for the WWE network. Now, WWE did not pay me. I was not hired by them. I was not under their payroll. I worked for a third-party company that WWE hired to do their mass control operations. And basically, what mass control operations are, they're the last line of defense of something going before something goes on air. We monitor the video signals, the audio signals, the closed captioning as they're kind of going on the air, and also 5 hours in advance before it goes on the air. And I'm supposed to catch all that before it goes to air. Obviously, I would take a job with WWE or AEW if given the opportunity. From a television background, the thing I would change with WWE is Kevin Dunn needs to stop cutting every 4 freaking seconds or less, or the zoom in, zoom out crap. It's so nauseating to a viewer. That would be something I change. WWE, other than that, has top level production value. Always has, always will.
Yep.
AEW, to their credit, have a pretty high production value too. Their video packages are cinematic, even better than WWE at times. Maybe sometimes their cameramen aren't in the right position to catch something, but that also kind of adds to the liveness of, oh, you never know what you're going to get kind of thing. But sometimes there's some big moments missed because the cameramen are in the wrong spot, or the director doesn't cut quick enough to those spots. Where WWE does it too much, AEW probably doesn't do it enough. So
I'd like to see the refs have a little more command over the matches in AEW.
Yes, Rick Knox could just basically walk to the locker room, eat popcorn, come back and count, and he pretty much would do the same thing that he does right now. Our next question comes from Anchor. You know, the podcasting platform where if you're listening on Anchor or Spotify, you actually can submit your questions on any of our Ask SCPB episodes. Just, fill in the thing on the Spotify app. Here's the question from Sean. Is AEW's fall 2021 level of fame, popularity, ratings, crowd, etc. about the near maximum they'll probably ever be to achieve? Or is there a higher level they realistically still reach?
What expectation would you have if you're trying to look at it from a perspective of can they compete with WWE, which I think is what a lot of people think when they think in terms of success, or the mission statement of AEW, if you will, like reaching that level of success and mainstream notoriety. Can they do it? I would say that history is not in their favor because WCW was the only company to do it. They did it for a little while and then they went out of business.
TNA too. TNA, went to as close as try to do 1 week on Monday Night Live, and that went to shit, and they never recovered after that.
The company that is going to find the most success is whichever company finds the next big thing in pro wrestling. AEW has the platform to do that because they have national TV. ECW had Stone Cold Steve Austin back in the day, and he was cutting Stone Cold-esque promos, but it was in a small market. It wasn't going to work. He wasn't going to get the notoriety and attention like he was going to get in WWE or WWF back in the day. It's same thing with Impact. Like, you're just not, the crowd's not big enough. You're not going to get the reaction. They don't have the reach. They don't have the ability to prop somebody up like that. Now, the question is, in my opinion, is MJF going to be a top guy in the industry, or is he going to be the next the guy? And I think he has all the potential in the world to be the next the guy. And he might be able to bring them past whatever level, I guess, in terms of success, whether you want to say their highest high was with Punk, whether it was with the debut of AEW originally and 1.2 million or however many viewed, and some went away and never came back. I think that MJF as a character, if he gets in the zone and you stay out of his way, can be that guy for them. At least to bring them past wherever their highest level was. Can they compete with WWE? I don't know. That's assuming they can keep him. I think they can, but I think that history does not really back them. That's my opinion.
So I think AEW's peak right now, as far as popularity, buzz, pay-per-view buys, obviously was the end of summer, early fall of 2021. That All Out, we got Adam Cole, we got Bryan Danielson, we got CM Punk. It kind of went.
Yeah.
And then the winter came and kind of dizzled. They bought Ring of Honor and Cody left, and it's just been a domino effect since. And then you have the backstage crap with Punk and Omega and the Young Bucks. And they haven't really recovered fully to that. But every successful business has peaks and valleys. WWE had the golden era of the 80s with Hogan. They nearly went out of business in 95. They had the Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression. Then the PG era kind of dipped. 2016, they had a huge spike in popularity, and they peaked. If you go by Google Trends, that was their last peak of popularity. They kind of dipped, and now they're kind of going back on the rise. AEW could do the same thing. There was a lot of buzz when they first started. It kind of dipped a little. Then the pandemic started, and they were basically like 1995 WWE, if you want to make the comparison ratings wise. Then they got Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson and CM Punk, and then boom. And then they had their $1 million buy gates and whatever. And now they're at that like 900,000, 1 million a week viewer. And until they actually include streaming into those numbers, which probably won't happen because, again, they don't count unless they air the same commercials. You're never going to get like a true concrete number of how many people are watching. And I know there was the whole 3.5 million thing, and I explained it in a YouTube short recently on how they got to that number. I honestly think they have not peaked in popularity. It's been 3 years. And to your point, MJF could bring them to that level, just like Austin brought WWE to that level. Literally, 93 to 95 was a 3-year total like horror show for WWE. Like, if it wasn't for Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and Yokozuna, Diesel, and Razor, those 5, Undertaker, those 6, WWE probably would have been out of business. But then Austin came. The Rock came. The Undertaker reinvented his gimmick, and you had DX. Foley, like they just had a tidal wave of things just going in the right direction for them. Now you have AEW. You kind of had a little bit of a tidal wave with Danielson and Cole and Punk. Kind of died off a little bit, but who's to say some guys from WWE move over? MJF does become the next big star, and they push Eddie Kingston more, and he becomes another top guy in AEW. Orange Cassidy becomes the main eventer people want him to be.
Can I make a proclamation here?
Go ahead.
When Full Gear, when Moxley faces MJF, if they truly intend MJF to be the next big face in the company, I think Moxley should win.
What?
And I think he should cheat to do it. Listen. Now, here's how this can work, because right now MJF is still kind of he's got the fans won over, but he's still a dick and he's still a heel at heart, and people still probably deep down are like, is this genuine or not? If Moxley cheats to win and he assumes the role as the villain, and they can somehow position or convince fans, if they do this, to be sympathetic towards MJF's rise, he can play the victim card, and he could say all the things he said about Tony Khan and turn it into Moxley, like incorporate the whole thing there, and just say like the industry, MJF, AEW does not want MJF to be on top. He's not a Young Bucks guy. He's not a Blackpool Combat guy. He's not a Tony Khan guy. And, he can just go off on that. And he can cut an epic promo. He could get sympathy from the fans. They can really get behind him. It would mean more for him to take the title off a villain Moxley than a pseudo is MJF a face versus a face Moxley, especially if Moxley cheated to win. That would do wonders for MJF, I think. That would get a huge reaction. It would get fans behind him. They'd have sympathy for MJF, which I don't think anybody would have ever thought could happen. And it puts you in a position where it's like, look, this company's been against me, and you know what? I'm going to win the title in spite of them.
I actually can buy into that story. You've convinced me.
Somebody get this to Tony Khan and pay me, damn it. Pay me my royalties.
Book it.
Send me an Orange Cassidy t-shirt at least.
There we go. You heard it here, folks.
Make sure it's of thin material, because I do have septic tank and I can only use 1 ply. Thank you. Cannot be thick t-shirt material. Make sure it's very thin.
Moving on to our next question here. From Unrealized Thoughts, do you think the quality of the women's division was a bit better with Becky Lynch? Becky isn't the best wrestler, even though she's better than some others think, but her character and storytelling is top-notch, in my opinion.
She's still amongst the best, in my opinion. I would never discredit her in-ring. I know that's like one of those trendy IWC things to say somebody like her isn't good in-ring. Yes, the women's division was at a different level with her, mostly because her and Bianca's matches and feud were very good. And Becky is a great character. You take somebody like her out, it's hard to fill those shoes. So yeah, you lose her, the women's division is going to suffer. You have her, and it's in a much better place. So
yeah, I think right now the women's division is kind of hurting without some of their star power. We don't have Charlotte. We don't have Sasha. We don't have Becky. People say, why are they keep pushing these guys or pushing these girls? This is why. Because when they're not there, there hasn't been someone to kind of pick it up. And even Ronda Rousey as women's champion, can you really say she's really done a good job on SmackDown? And part of it's not her fault. I mean, she's gotten better as the heel version of herself than the baby face. And Liv Morgan has her fan base, but as SmackDown Women's Champion, people said that wasn't working. Damage Control, people are now, arguing, are they working on Raw as the women's tag team champions too? And they just need more. And what's Nikki Cross going to do? What's Emma going to do now that she's back on WWE? Chelsea Green is supposedly coming back. What do they do with her? What do they do with Mandy Rose? There's a lot of questions here about that. But our next question comes from Torta de Lengua and actually does talk about Mandy Rose. Which brand would be better for Mandy Rose on the main roster, Raw or SmackDown?
Probably SmackDown. I mean, if you look at Raw, yeah, they have Damage Control. You could say if it's working, it's not working. You look at Raw, they have Bianca Belair. Yes, Becky's hurt. She's not there. SmackDown has Ronda, but I think they need fresh faces there, especially somebody with, credibility, at least from a standpoint of, hey, she's been a champion for over a year to challenge Ronda. So I would probably say SmackDown.
I think Raw.
I guess that could go both ways. I think it could go both ways, to be honest. I think the same case could be made for Raw.
I think Raw would be the better pick because Raw needs heels. And if Becky's coming back as a babyface, that doesn't help their problem either. Even if Bayley and Damage Control manage to get over eventually, you still need other heels. Is Nikki Cross a heel? Is she a babyface? She attacked both on Raw this past week. So we don't know what she's going to be. After that, who do you got? Bring Toxic Attraction in and make them another heel in the women's division. And you got Rhea Ripley, but she's, body slamming Luke Gallows. She's not doing anything with the women right now, but people love to say Triple H does great with the women's divisions. That's been their Achilles heel since he's taken over. Our last question comes from Scott Criscolo, host of the Place to Be Nation Main Event Podcast, friends of the show here. Who was Cena's best opponent? Edge or Randy Orton?
I'm going to say Edge because I feel like that never, at least in my opinion, never really overstayed its welcome. I think the Randy Orton Cena feud got so repetitive that people were just like, can this please stop? Can this please go away? I think if they revisited it right now, people would be into it because I think Orton has had, before he got hurt at least, was having this crazy rejuvenation in his career where people are getting behind him again.
Yep.
Even the same thing with Sheamus. It's weird. Wrestling is very strange in the fact where 1 year you're go away, we don't want to see you, and then 3 years later, all of a sudden, right place, right time, fans get behind you. So
not only that, 2 years ago we're talking about they're pushing all these old guys. Stop pushing the old guys. Stop pushing the old guys. And now Randy Orton, Chris Jericho, Sheamus are the most over guys in their promotions. And they're all over the age of 40 and 45. Jericho's over 50. Age doesn't mean shit in pro wrestling. It's how you get over.
It never did. It never did. When you go back and look at the age of Austin when he was on top, I think he was 36, 37.
Yeah, he was definitely in his mid-30s.
But it's not young by professional athletes. Ric Flair wrestling matches in WCW.
Ric Flair won the 92 Royal Rumble when he was 42.
And again, this goes back to, and this is kind of a side rant, but this goes back to when Edge won the Royal Rumble and people are like, oh, old part-timers, Brock Lesnar, same excuse, old guys.
And Edge is not a part-timer. That was just people trying to make up stupid narratives. Edge is a part-timer. No, he's not. Recently, he disappeared, but that's part of the storyline that he's done with Judgment Day. It's not where he just does his match and then disappears. He's actually there almost every damn week. Ronda Rousey, when she won, another part-timer won. She's there more than almost any freaking woman on the WWE main roster. Not a part-timer. But again, that's deviating from the actual conversation.
Long story short, I think the Edge Cena feud was more important and I think was better.
WWE did a Untold documentary on the Cena Edge feud. Edge went to John Cena's dad's house and they brought up the spinner belt and they brought up the TLC match that they had and where Edge beat Cena in Boston and John Cena beat Edge in Toronto. When you watch that documentary, and yeah, I understand they can manipulate the information and tell the story however they want to make it look better. I watched that back and I'm like, wow, that really, going back and thinking about it, that was a really good feud. And I'll admit, that was a time where I wasn't really paying attention too much to wrestling per se, but that was one of the things I do remember is that Edge and John Cena storyline and John Cena's dad getting involved and Edge knocking him out and getting thrown into the Long Island Sound and stuff like that. It really was a good storyline.
I remember Randy Orton matches, and not so much now. And I think Orton is definitely more of a character guy and a technical guy, and he's got to be in there with the right guy. But I was definitely of the mindset that Randy Orton's matches never lived up to the expectations that I had for him. And I was a big Randy Orton fan because of his character, and I thought he did great work. But I always remember walking away from a Randy Orton match saying, that was not as good as I was hoping. Like, it just wasn't clicking.
Right.
He's gotten much better,
Yes.
much better. And I think he's great. But there at the beginning of his career there, even during some of the feuds with Cena, it was always like this isn't living up to what the expectation based on how important this feud is supposed to be. And you never really had that with Edge. Edge was always great in the
Right. And I think, to me, when I stopped watching, there was a moment in my life where I just stopped watching. And it really was this chunk where Cena and Orton were always feuding and always having matches. Yeah. I forget the exact number, but it was something like over 100 matches between the two in some combination in a 2-year span. I'm like, wow, that's a damn lot. And the problem was at that time, there was no one else to put in that spot against John Cena. They only did it so many times was because Orton was the only one, you know?
Yeah.
It was a real low point in WWE. And yeah, there was the LOL John Cena wins era there where I think a lot of people kind of ran away from pro wrestling at that point or found other means. I was never an independent wrestling guy. I just stopped watching wrestling entirely up until Punk's pipe bomb, started getting back into it. And then when the network came in 2014, I came back to like watching every pay-per-view, every Raw, every SmackDown. And then 4 years later, starting this damn podcast with you. So yeah, I would definitely say Edge over Orton because it's quality over quantity. Yeah, and I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. But if you have questions for us on our next Ask SCPB episode, there's plenty of ways you could do it. You could hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. You could comment below, and we give higher priority to those who support us through Super Thanks. And you can also get some cool perks, including ad-free episodes, early access, and more by becoming an SCPB member. Click join under this video, and always be a part of the Babble Club be a part of the Babble section by subscribing and hitting that bell so you don't miss another episode of the Squared Circle Psycho Babble.